Yes, Geordies, welcome back to another episode. The first thing is always, I hope everyone's well. But where do I start with that? Because it's another defeat for Newcastle United, another away defeat for Newcastle United. We've only won one game all season. But do you know what's worrying me the most? We actually had the foundations of a victory. We got that early goal, and that should have given us some momentum to really build on this after beating Manchester City and go out and take the game to Marseille. But what did we do? We sat back. So we're going to be discussing it all. We're going to be discussing the loyalty Eddie Howe has to underperforming players. We're going to look at why he set up in a back five and why it wasn't necessary to set up in a back five. And the reason why I'm disappointed, guys, because it's another away defeat, another game thrown away, more mistakes, and I don't understand the back five. I did not understand the back five. As soon as that lineup came out, with the formation, with the player personnel, I thought to myself, we're getting beat tonight. We're going to get beat. I even tweeted it out that we're getting beat. And even when we went 1-0 up, I even tweeted out saying, this game's only going to go one way. And that way was Marseille winning this game. Because as soon as that lineup, that formation came out, I knew what to expect. That was a defensive performance. And that's exactly what we got. We actually started the game really well. The first opening 15 minutes, I thought, yeah, we look quite good. We're pressing with intent. We had some energy about us. But as soon as we went 1-0 up, what did we do? We went back to damage limitations. We sat back, invited pressure on, and eventually Marseille were always going to score. Their game was all about attacking. So if you invite pressure on, eventually they will break it down. But Marseille were there to be beaten, and that's the most frustrating thing. But do you know what's frustrating me the most in just overall this season? Is that we cannot defend the lead. We'll try and sit back and defend. We'll continuously concede goals. So does that just not tell you that what we're doing just isn't working, but we'll continue to do it? And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And that's what we're doing with our team selections, but also our in-game management is so poor from Eddie Howe and the players, because this season, no team in the Premier League has dropped points from winning positions than Newcastle United. And now we're beginning to do it in Europe. One win away from home this season just isn't good enough. Before we get on to the game and break down the goals and speak about individual performances, let's speak about the lineup, because when I seen the lineup, I thought, right, this is only going to go one or two ways. Either he's gone with a back five, Jacob Murphy, a right wing back, Tino Livramento, a left wing back, then your sensible back three, it's your centre backs, Malik Chow, Dan Burn, and Fabian Shaw, or he's going to play Malik Chow at right back, be Tino Livramento at left back, and have Dan Burn and Fabian Shaw as your two centre backs. That would have been my choice. Now, I don't think Malik Chow is a right back, but if you're going to have to do it, you've got to do it. I would have preferred that over the back three. And I'll tell you why, because when we play a back three, it is a defensive back three. Our wing backs sit in the back five. When you play with the back five, your wing backs have to give you some width. They didn't do that at all. Jacob Murphy is not a right wing back, and that impacted his performance. And I'm going to say it, guys, I actually think Eddie Howe set us up to defend. I actually think he didn't think we'd take the lead so early, and we did, and that should have give us some momentum and the courage to really be brave in this game, because the way you beat Marseille is by getting at them. Marseille's weaknesses is their defensive area, so unless you don't get at them and invite them to attack you, they're going to break it down, because their strength is going forward. Marseille weren't great tonight. They're not a very good side. We made them look better than they were. We made Aubameyang look like prime Drogba, and that's a frustrating thing. Even if you have a look at a couple of these images that I'm putting on the screen here, in the 18th minute of the game, we had every single player in our own defensive third. When we overturn the ball, where we've got to go, you cannot cause the opposition any problems if you've got every single player, including your striker, and we'll get onto that very shortly, in your own defensive third. Okay, I thought we're probably just sitting back, defending our lead just for a moment, seeing the pressure out. But let's move it on to the 36th minute. We've done the exact same. This continued to happen throughout the 90 minutes. When you don't pose the opposition any sort of threat, then you're going to come unstuck. There's no focal point up front. How many times do we have to say Anthony Gordon is not a striker? He's not a striker. He doesn't give you what strikers should give you. And how many times do we have to say that Eddie Howe has not found a way to incorporate Nick Valdemara? So these defeats are on Eddie Howe, because he's doing the same thing over and over again. and it's costing us games. I know you're probably sitting there thinking, well, we had 20 odd plus shots in the game. There was no conviction to those shots. We should have scored 3 in that first half, but Marseille should have scored 3 as well. That's the frustrating thing. We set up to be defensive, and we're not defensive. We're too easy to play through. In Marseille, we're just getting through and through and creating opportunities, and eventually Aubameyang was going to score. Look, we went 1-0 up, and it was a wonderful take and goal from Harvey Barnes. Harvey Barnes on fire at the minute, and I actually thought we deserved to go 1-0 up after 15 minutes, and I thought, let's continue how we started. We've got the lead. What we're doing is working, but no, we'll retreat, and then the Aubameyang show begins, and we'll get on to that very shortly. But why is it we lose all of our energy when we go 1-0 up? We went 1-0 up against West Ham, got beat 3-1. Went 1-0 up against Brentford, got beat 3-1. Went 1-0 up against Marseille, got beat 2-1. We continue just to retreat and invite pressure on, and it's incredibly frustrating. Let's have some balance to this. And I honestly thought we started really, really well. I thought we were aggressive. We're on the front foot. We're moving forwards. We had runners off the ball. We started really, really well. We had players getting into the penalty area. So I thought we've built on this Manchester City victory. And I've honestly said this Manchester City victory counts for nothing if we don't perform against Marseille and Everton on the weekend. Now we're going Everton on the weekend with a lot of pressure. But this game was a continuation of all season. Newcastle United generally start quite well, but our game management from the players and the Eddie Howe is abysmal at the minute. And as soon as we went 1-0 up and started sitting back a little bit more, that's when the lack of confidence came in. We look sloppy, disinterested. Honestly, get the feeling that the players hate playing 5 at the back because it's far too defensively minded. And I'll say it again, Marseille were there to be beaten. Look, it's always going to be a difficult game when you go to places like Marseille. It's a hostile atmosphere. You need to embrace that. And I felt we did that in the first 15 minutes. But after that, where did our patterns of play go? This is the frustrating thing with Eddie Howe. There's no patterns of play. It's like panic play when we've got the ball. We cannot control games with the ball. Too sloppy. No options in possession. A manager's job is to find a way of getting the players in good positions, and then the players become a little bit innovative once to get in those positions. One of the biggest responsibilities for a manager is getting your players or your best players into good positions so then they can thrive. We're seeing none of that with Newcastle United, and that's me being brutally honest. There's no patterns of play set up. There's no ability to get your players into the best positions that suit their skill set. That is the most worrying thing going into these games. Like I said earlier, it's not about this game as an isolation. It's about the collective. It's continuously happening. Poor performance against Brentford, poor performance against West Ham, poor performance against Fulham, poor performance against Wolves. And we even won those games. We haven't been great. There's no patterns of play on the offensive side of things. This is my worry with Eddie Howe. When we've got the ball, we panic. We don't know what to do when we've got the ball. It's just playing into space. That's all we've got. There's no patterns of play set up. There's no sequences. There's no little triangles. There's no way of beating the opposition. You look at Marseille, they look structured going forwards. You had Bacola, who was starting his first Champions League game, playing through the lines. They look organised. They look like they knew their responsibilities. When it comes to Newcastle United, we just look a shadow of ourselves when we're in possession. And this is why I continue to think Eddie Howe just sets us up to defend. When we get the ball, we'll try and play forwards, but there's no urgency, there's no conviction, there's no patterns of play. What are we working on in the training ground? It looks like too many players are just going through the motions. I'm going to be honest, and you might not like us saying this, it looks like they're not enjoying the football. I don't know whether that's tactically, because Eddie Howe's setting them up in a certain way, or they're just not enjoying it because they're not in good form. But I kind of feel like it's the first. I kind of feel like it is tactically, because when you watch us, we're just sitting either a bank of 5-4-1 or a 4-5-1. There's no other structure that we've got. There's no game management to flip the game to give the opposition something to worry about, and that's the trouble. And I feel like the players are beginning to notice it. And just look at the body language of the players. Let's start with Anthony Gordon. We all know, me, you, him, everybody in this, watching this, knows that Anthony Gordon is not a striker. But yet Eddie Howe seems to continue. Hopefully this game has put the Anthony Gordon as a striker to rest. He doesn't have the mindset of a striker. He doesn't have the know-how of when to run off the ball, when to come and show, when to link up play. He hasn't got that instinctive movement in and around the penalty box because he needs to book up his ideas. If he wants to go to the World Cup in the summer, he's got to perform. Now, I've seen people saying he's playing for a move. You do not get a move performing like that. You do not get a move if you're performing like that. Liverpool won't look at Anthony Gordon and think, yeah, he's our guy. He has to perform to get that move. And I don't want to put this all down to Eddie Howe, but the players need to take a look at themselves as well. But when has Eddie Howe ever changed the course of the game in his favour? Not very often. Now, that game to me looked like a game of two managers. One manager that wanted to win the game, had some attacking intent, and the other manager that was happy just to concede possession, sit in a low block and try and win the game that way. And then when we eventually do get a hold of the ball, we look like rabbits in a headlight. And I'm going to say it again, just like West Ham, just like Brentford, and tonight, Eddie Howe looked like a rabbit in a headlight. Now, this isn't me saying Eddie Howe has got to go, but he's not immune to any criticism. When things go wrong, we're allowed to sit here and say, you need to do better. Before we break down the goals individually, let's just summarise this. Momentum wasted. Newcastle had control early, but failed to sustain pressure or manage the game after scoring. And that is happening time and time again. Like I say, if it happens once or twice in the season, I can accept it. I can accept getting beat. I don't mind losing games of football, but it's this manner that we're losing. The capitulation after half-time is baffling. Aubameyang struck twice in just 4 minutes, completely flipping the game. Then there's also the loyalty to our players. Nick Pope's costly error, his misjudged decision to rush out, allowed Aubameyang to score, sparking their turnaround. And then there's our poor away performance. Newcastle struggles on the road continue. And then just like we've seen time and time again, the second half drop off in performance. We look disjointed, disorganized. Let's be brutally honest, sluggish. So again, if I'm being honest, for me, this game was self-inflicted. An excellent start, which we could have built on, undone by sloppy errors, poor game management, and a goalkeeper mistake that shifted momentum, really. One of the most frustrating things coming out of this game, look, if you're going to be defensive, at least be defensive, at least be compact, difficult to play through. But how many times did I highlight against Brighton, against Bournemouth, against Brentford, against West Ham, players just picking up pockets of space in between our defence and midfield? Happens time and time again, and it was happening against Marseille. Barcola, actually thought he played really well. Yes, his decision-making can improve, but his willingness to get on the ball in between the lines caused us a lot of problems. We never knew how to manage that situation, and it's on Eddie Howe to do that. And it's also on Eddie Howe to stop picking underperforming players. This stubbornness, this persistence with these aging players are going to cost him his job, because you can't continue to do this. You can't continue to pick players that are continuously making mistakes. Edward, let's talk, Edward, because you're persistent with players that continuously let you down is going to become your own downfall. And let's be brutally honest about it, because Nick Pope doesn't offer us any more than what Aaron Ramsdale would. Aaron Ramsdale would offer us a lot more in possession, a lot more security in that back line. Now, let's talk about Nick Pope for a second, because he has absolutely no right to come out for that ball. Malik Chow is in a foot race with Aubameyang. There's only going to be one winner in that situation. Then you've also got cover for him as well. So if Nick Pope stays on his line there, the only thing that will happen here is Aubameyang will take a touch, take a second touch of the ball and probably move into the wide area, and then that lets your defenders to get back into position. If Aubameyang is never, ever, ever going to score from there unless Nick Pope does what he does. Take nothing away from the finish, because the finish was absolutely superb. But what on earth is Nick Pope thinking? It's these little decisions that are costing Newcastle United moments in games time and time again. And what do goals do? Goals change games, and that certainly impacted our confidence, especially for those 5 minutes of madness. And if I'm being brutally honest, if I don't see Aaron Ramsdale in goal against Everton, I'm going to flip my lid. I'm going to blow my mind. And I don't understand this continuation with Dan Burn. I don't get it. Yes, Dan Burn's been an unbelievable servant for us, but Sven Botman is a better player. We're going to lose Sven Botman if we don't give him any incentive to stay. Why should Sven Botman stay when you're getting displaced by a player, an aging player like Dan Burn? No wonder he hasn't signed his deal yet. What is Sven Botman done to be taken out this side? What has Dan Burn done to continue getting played by Eddie Howe? He's got something over Eddie Howe, I'm convinced. In playing Dan Burn as a wide centre-back in a back three, you may as well play him left-back, because when you're playing as a wide centre-back in a back three, you need to be the one that goes into those wide areas, and you need to be the one that stops those one-on-one individual battles. Dan Burn is a wide centre-back in a back three. You may as well play him at left-back, and we all know what Dan Burn's like at left-back. So this continuation with Dan Burn is really frustrating. This is the moment for us to go out with the old and in with the new. It's time for Sven Botman and Malik Chow to take over Fabian Shaw and Dan Burn. I just don't get it. I don't get the tactics. I don't get the player selections. I don't get the substitutions. I don't get playing Lewis Miley at right back. He played quite well, actually. But putting him in the midfield will give us a lot more control than what we had. So I don't get playing Lewis Miley at right back. I don't get the tactics. I just don't get it, guys. Someone please explain to me what Eddie Howe was seeing in Nick Pope, in Dan Burn, in playing five in the back, because I can't see it. Let's break down the second goal, because again, this was unbelievable centre-forward play from Aubameyang, but it's so avoidable because, look, Timothy Weah stands up Tino Livramento in a one-on-one duel. That's fine. What Harvey Barnes should be doing in this situation is making a 2-on-1. He's not doing anything standing where he is. He's not blocking the space. He's not creating a 2-on-1 situation. He's not giving Tino Livramento any help. So that's mistake number one. Mistake number two is Fabian Shaw and Dan Burn in this situation. Look at Aubameyang. He's already started his movement. He knows, as good centre-forwards know, they've got to get in front of their man. But what does centre-backs need to do? They need to stop their centre-forward getting in front of them. Fabian Shaw just lets Aubameyang run across him. And then once you let your centre-forward run across you, like in this situation, you've got no chance. What Fabian Shaw needs to do here is give Aubameyang a little bit of a nudge, take him off his stride, just do something just to prevent him getting in front of you and getting to that ball first. And I've got no idea what Dan Burn is doing either. Again, he's not blocking that space. You've got to protect that near post. Dan Burn should be doing everything to put his body on the line in front of that ball. But once you get in that situation, Aubameyang's in the ascendancy because he's got the momentum in the movement and he's got in front of his man. Fabian Shaw has to be stronger in that situation. Just another continuation of errors, and it's incredibly frustrating. There was a couple of good performances. I think Harvey Barnes deserves a shout out because he's now scored 4 goals, provided 1 assist in 5 Champions League games. He's also had 4 goals and 1 assist in his last 4 games. So he's a guy in form, but nobody else is rising to his level. I also think Joe Willock deserves a little bit of a shout out because I thought he offered us some athleticism. Now, I've always said continuously, I said in the summer, Joe Willock's best position is that number 10 role in a 4-3-2-1. This is why I said Joe Willock probably should go to a team like Crystal Palace, playing that number 10 role because it suits his skill set so well. So I'm not surprised he was one of our better performing players on the night because he was playing in a position that suited him. But yet again, Eddie Howe around him was picking square pegs and round holes. Jacob Murphy's not a right wing back. Anthony Gordon's not a striker. Dan Burn is not a wide centre back. Nick Pope isn't even a goalkeeper. I'm sorry for being negative, but the performance wasn't as bad as what it was against Brentford or West Ham. But the frustrating thing is doing the same thing over and over again. I honestly think if we played a 4-3-3 and actually took the game to Marseille, we would have won that game. But look, that's all I've got to say on it. I know it wasn't a perfect video, but you know what? I'm just frustrated, man. I want to hear your thoughts. Let me know your comments in the below, but this means we've got to perform against Everton. I'm not even bothered about the result. I want the performance. Because not once have I watched us this season and thought, we've done well today. We've scraped victories. But let me know your thoughts in the below. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And until next time, away the lads.